I yield to the gentleman from Nebraska.
Well, I thank Mr. Rutherford, a great friend and colleague. Thank you for yielding, and thank you, Madam Speaker. Today I rise to recognize a bipartisan issue that threatens the safety of our law enforcement officers and our communities in which they serve, and we have a solution for it. Enacted in 2004, the Law Enforcement Officer Safety Act, known as LEOSA, established clear guidelines allowing experienced retired or off-duty officers who maintain proper training to obtain certification allowing him or her to carry concealed firearms. The desired purpose was to create a shared national policy between states allowing off-duty and retired officers to carry their firearms wherever they are, granted they are qualified and have received appropriate credentials. As many of my colleagues know, LEOSA has enjoyed a long history of support from both sides of the aisle. When it was first proposed by a Republican, LEOSA was co-sponsored by more than half of the House, and subsequent amendments signed into law in 2010 and 2013 under Democratic President Barack Obama expanded LEOSA's coverage to include law enforcement officers in most federal agencies, as well as military police. In both instances, the reforms were sponsored by Democratic senators. LEOSA has always been a bipartisan priority because it's a law enforcement and public safety issue. It's not a Second Amendment or a guns rights issue. The same is true about improvements in H.R. 1156, the LEOSA Reform Act, which I'm sponsoring. The LEOSA Reform Act seeks to correct a number of unintended gaps and weaknesses in the original LEOSA bill. These gaps and weaknesses are not due to intentional restrictions in the original statute. Rather, they are areas in which the original statute is silent, resulting in conflicting interpretations and unintended restrictions which effectively limit the ability of off-duty and retired officers to carry their firearms. And we want them to do it in a manner that's safest for them and the public. The lack of specific language defeats the original intent of the law, which is to allow off-duty and retired officers to carry their firearms wherever they go. Granted, they have to be qualified and have to have received appropriate credentials. That's a given. It has also created an inconsistent implementation across states, leaving many officers to either assume unintended risk when carrying in accord with LEOSA or decide not to carry at all. The LEOSA Reform Act adds specific language to address these unintended weaknesses, and in doing so will make existing laws stronger and more workable for those who seek its benefit, while maintaining the rigorous standards that currently apply. The bill does not put more guns into our communities. Individuals affected by this legislation already have the authority to carry concealed weapons in most locations. Rather, H.R. 1156 will help ensure guns that are already in the hands of trained and certified law enforcement officers and retired officers can safely and legally be carried wherever they may be. In fact, the LEOSA Reform Act will help ensure firearms do not end up in the hands of criminals by allowing law enforcement officers and retired officers to keep their firearms safely on their person rather than being forced to leave them unattended in vehicles or parking lots, locations that are currently restricted from carrying. The public's need for rapid intervention by off-duty and retired officers is made clear by the recent incident in California where the heroic actions of an off-duty federal officer who ran and shot at the synagogue gunman saved countless lives. It's an example that we see repeatedly. With the rise of tragic shootings in our nation, empowering trained professionals to carry will allow them to respond more quickly to emergencies, provide years of expertise to these situations. I've heard from law enforcement officials throughout Nebraska's 2nd District and the nation on the importance of these changes and how those changes they'll have in the lives of our community's heroes and their ability to protect themselves and others. In fact, the LEOSA Reform Act has been endorsed by 20 professional law enforcement organizations whose membership, when combined, is representative of well over half of all law enforcement in our country. Our National Police Week, I urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to join me in providing greater public safety for law enforcement and our communities at home by co-sponsoring the LEOSA Reform Act. Officer safety and public safety is a bipartisan issue, and together we must do better. And I'll just close with this. If I'm in a situation where I'm being victimized, who would I want near me? I would love to have a retired or an off-duty policeman that is armed. And this bill makes that more likely. With that, I yield back. Thank you.
General, and I'm a proud co-sponsor of your LEOSA bill. And having been a law enforcement officer, I understand exactly what you're trying to accomplish, and I support you 110% in that effort. So thank you, General.
We'll get her done.
Appreciate the words. And now, Madam Speaker, I'd like to yield 2 minutes to the gentlelady from